Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, July 15th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist and director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And Matt's colleague at the American Enterprise Institute, our media commentary columnist, Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
So Joe Biden has now spoken 3 times in the last 36 hours about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And frankly, I am puzzled by what is going on here because I don't think after the first momentary statement on Saturday night, which was appropriate, I don't really understand what his game is. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know why he's doing it. And the contrast, let's just face it. I mean, the contrast between Trump rising after having been shot in the head to his feet to, pump his fist in the air and shout, "Fight, fight, fight," while he was let out, to Biden's really declining physical mien.
You just answered your question. That's why he did it.
To emphasize the distinction between himself and Trump?
To show that he can stay up past 8 p.m. and, talk about how we should settle our problems at the battle box.
So that's why he did it? Maybe now we can talk about how he did it. Or what Jen O'Malley Dillon, the Biden campaign chairman, apparently on a phone call said, "There's no game plan for a political moment like this." Yeah, there is no game plan for a political moment like this. So as a result, people show themselves as they should, right? They show themselves without a game plan. So how do they react when there's no game plan? Like there's no game plan for when 2 planes fly in to the 2 tallest buildings in New York City. There's no game plan when, when all sorts of things happen, and how people react spontaneously has a great deal to do with how we judge them as human beings, as characters, as people like that. And I think that Biden is being ill-served by himself and by his people in the reaction to the to the moment that requires spontaneity and leadership.
Well, I think it demonstrates a certain level of confusion on the part of Biden, his team, his administration. Just to walk back through the past 48 hours, it took Biden quite a while to release an initial statement and to come before the cameras after the attempt on Trump's life. And it was noticeable. Now, the very online people that we are, I was with a group of friends, and we were all saying, "Oh, there's George W.'s statement about the assassination attempt. There's Barack Obama's statement about the assassination attempt. There's Nancy Pelosi's statement about the assassination attempt." No word from Biden. Finally, Biden comes out. His initial remarks were terrible because he would not call it an assassination attempt. And I think the reaction to that first move was such that he and his team felt he needed to go out again. So then we had the second appearance yesterday afternoon, which is also very brief, and where he said that he would be speaking to the country at length on this matter in a major address from the Oval Office. Okay. He gave the address from the Oval Office. I stayed up to watch it. I was very tired. And so I stayed up to watch this major address. It was a nothing burger. It was like maybe 10 minutes long. I think it was shorter than 10 minutes. He emphasized the need to tone down the rhetoric. That's the big message coming from every corner now in the aftermath of the assassination attempt. He, I think, laudably talked about the victim, right? The dad who was killed, protecting his own children, his own family at the rally. But then weirdly, he did some slight partisan things. he gave this account of political violence in the United States, and he subsumed the attack on Steve Scalise as just part of attacks on congressmen in general. And then he continued the list, and the only kind of left political violence he mentioned specifically was the attack on Trump. Now, we don't know the motive of the would-be assassin. I want to take this moment to say that there is a distinction between intent and motive that is sometimes being blurred in social media circles. We know his intent. His intent was to kill Donald Trump. But the motive still remains clear. Was he just a psychopath? Was there an actual, propaganda motive? Nonetheless, that list was a little odd because, and then of course he completely omitted the most left-wing coded form of political violence of the past decade, and that's the BLM riots of 2020, right? So finally, though, the other thing he did, which was a little odd, was he said, we're going to tone down the rhetoric. We're going to be a calm nation, but I'm still going to have my campaign this week, and I'm still going to go around the country this week and talk about all my big differences. That, again, just, I think, emphasizes he doesn't really know what to do here, because his primary message headed into this convention, into this Republican convention, was that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. And now he can't say that, at least for a month, I think, because if he were to say it, people would rightly criticize him for amping up the temperature.
I think there is a broad plan at work here, actually. A strategy if they're unclear on the tactics. And I think it's a cynical plan. And I think it is to seize on this moment, to make the most of it, to change what was the most salient fact of the election up to this point, which was Biden is incapable of serving and running, to take this and to try to turn his image around here as Biden is in control and capable of healing the heated partisan divide. And I think that's why they just kept going with it. Showed up once, showed up the next day, wrote a longer speech. And I think we may not be done with it because something presented itself other than, trust me, I remember things. Trust me, I'm okay. Trust me, I have good hours. So I think that is the general idea.
It's more about staving off the internal threat within the Democratic Party than it is the broader.
That's where it was so ineffective. Two things about that speech, the Oval Office speech last night, that struck me. Obviously, they need to learn where to put his teleprompter because he was looking off too high above the camera. He looked a little, which made him look confused, even if he didn't necessarily sound confused. We're not used to seeing him sitting at the in the Oval Office doing presidential stuff. That's an unusual sight to see that on television. And also the contrast between how he spoke and what he said compared to another Democrat yesterday who I think did do something, who did exactly what Biden's handlers hope he can do and I think failed. That's Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who gave a very moving press conference. And it was almost shocking to see a young, energetic politician of either party just get up and
listen
deal
how
with
we're
crisis.
talking. Listen how we're talking. He's 60 years old. He's not that young.
But in our
we've gotten to a
gerontocracy,
gerontocratic moment at which we are looking. It's like
he's
calling
a toddler by today's
standards. like he's 3 years younger than I am. Like,
but he did a really good job. He did exactly what was called for, and his role. He played his role exactly as he should, and in a very nonpartisan way. And that's not what Biden was really quite able to pull off.
I mean, I want to point out that one of the things that he mentioned in the Oval Office speech, which is highly problematic and a sign of a kind of partisan disease within the Democratic Party. I'll what about it at some point to this show to talk about how bad Republicans are also. So don't worry if you're waiting for that. But he mentioned the kidnapping attempt on Gretchen Whitmer. Okay, the kidnapping attempt on Gretchen Whitmer, for which I think 6 people were convicted and 3 were acquitted, was not real. There was no kidnapping attempt of Gretchen Whitmer. It was an FBI sting operation that gathered 9 lunatics and tried to get them to plan a kidnapping of the governor of Michigan, and then stung them, and then arrested them and charged them with a conspiracy to kidnap her. Now, I'm not saying that the convictions were wrong and that their intentions weren't criminal and all of that. That is not the same thing. A man was shot in the head on Saturday night. Steve Scalise was shot and nearly died. Paul Pelosi was hit on the head with a hammer by a psychotic. These are real acts of real partisan violence that took place in the United States. And bringing in the Gretchen Whitmer story is some kind of weird acknowledgement that what you're going for is not an effort to dial down the partisan rhetoric and the partisan hostilities in order to find new unity. It's to kind of dial them up a little bit, to say, maybe you guys don't know about this, but the Democratic governor of Michigan was targeted for kidnapping. She was not targeted for kidnapping. The targeting for her kidnapping was done by the FBI in a sting operation in order to roust out people who were, bad actors, which again is,
I think the most notable rhetorical moments in the speech were unplanned. So Christine already alluded to his the president's beautiful neologism, battle box. Because he was talking about how we don't settle.
At least he didn't say bullet box. I mean, he could have said bullet box.
He doesn't see. We don't settle our differences through violence in America. He said we settle them at the ballot box. But because he had been thinking about bullets, he said battle instead of. But the very concept of the battle box is amazing, and also
like
undercuts
political
his
octagon. Let's bring it. Let's do it.
It's Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Right, exactly. That's what I thought. Or Thunderdome. It's kind of not quite Thunderdome. It's the battle box, and so that was unplanned. And then the other amazing moment that was unplanned was when he was talking about, this is what makes America special. We need to get back. And he knew, you can see it on his face. He was about to say, let's make America great again. And he stopped himself. And he kind of recovered. And he said, this is what our nation is about. He went back to one of his familiar lines. So I don't think this speech will be long remembered. And I do think that Abe is on the right track when he says Biden's activities this week since the assassination attempt and through the convention are really about trying to snuff out the fire that is the internal revolt within his party to replace him as the nominee. And we have some confirmation from a story in the Washington Post today that since the debate, Nancy Pelosi has been convinced that Biden will lose. And so she is trying behind the scenes to ease him off the ticket. That seems pretty unlikely right now.
I mean, last night, a couple of people texted me at like 5:00 yesterday to say he's going to drop out tonight, right? Because he's already spoken twice, and as a very sage friend of mine said, like the White House speech writing crew isn't going to be able to write a better Angels of Our Nature speech in 24 hours. They're just not really that good at it, nor would it have to be immediate. So maybe he's going to drop out. I said I thought that if that were actually the case, it probably would have leaked. Once decisions like that are made, the whole notion that the Biden White House is a paragon of secrecy or closed off. I think we would have found out about it, and obviously it didn't happen. But the very fact that was the speculation yesterday speaks to the weirdness of the fact that he spoke twice. He spoke at 12:30 or 1:30 or whenever it was. Yesterday, and then said, I'm going to speak later. And if what he did was he spoke for 3 minutes at 1:30, and then he spoke for 6 minutes at 8, it is time for us to all just almost say this thing is over. And I don't mean it's over because Trump pumped his fist and Biden didn't. I mean, they are behaving like a losing political organization, not like a winning. They don't know what to do. They have no creative spark. They don't know how to turn things to their advantage. And they also don't know when to pull back and retreat. Classically, the week of the other party's political convention, really until 2012, It was the classic presumption that the other party would go quiet and give you your 4 days. You got your 4 days. The president wasn't going to go around giving speeches and trying to compete with this major political event. At some point, people said, we're not doing that anymore because, there's too much, there's too much at risk or whatever. We people want us to be active and to be responding or something like that. This would have been a perfect moment to basically restore that principle. And Biden say, I said yesterday, I'm suspending my campaigning, I'm suspending ads and all that. And we're just going to let the Republicans have their convention and the war resumes Friday. The way it should, and that would have, in a weird way, been a creative response, which is, I'm not gonna play. I'm not gonna try to get in on this story. It's not my story. We have a lot of time till the election. Trump has a ceiling. I have a ceiling. He has a floor. I have a floor. Even with the shooting and all of that, every indication would be that this is going to be a close election, at least in, numerical and absolute numerical terms. But the fact that they don't know what to do and that they had 24 hours and they still didn't know what to do or what to have him say is a reason that I think that Democrats should be running to the exits and that it's every man for himself. Like, it is time for Republican, Democratic, congressional and senatorial candidates and gubernatorial candidates to come up, as Newt Gingrich said in 1990 after George H.W. Bush raised taxes, do whatever you have to do to save yourself in this atmosphere. Because looking at the Biden team over the last 36 hours should give no Democrat confidence that they're going to do anything but be an anchor on the feet of other Democrats.
But there's a void that would have existed, I think, I think their thinking is that we have to fill a void that's right now being filled by the mainstream media in trying to explain to the American public how they should feel about the attempt on Donald Trump's life. And boy, are their messaging seems kind of consistently bad in the sense that there's either a lot of scolding of anyone on the right for political rhetoric. We saw this on ABC News. George Stephanopoulos having conversation with, was it Martha Raddatz, where they're going on and on about how in a version of the horrific argument made against rape victims that they shouldn't have worn such a short skirt. It was basically like, well, Trump started all this with his violent rhetoric. And so what did he expect? That is a theme in the mainstream media. We're seeing a lot of wild overreaction and downplaying of just how serious an attempt this was on his life. And so Biden not saying anything, I think that void's filled by the media in a way that for his own voters could actually not be good for him.
Before we turn to the media, I want to make one more observation about Biden's speech, and that is, I guess the real news out of the speech was he is ordering an independent investigation into the circumstances surrounding the massive security failure that allowed the wannabe assassin to climb onto that roof less than 170 yards away from where Donald Trump would be speaking, and to fire off a couple of rounds, killing one, injuring two others pretty seriously. The reports are that the two rally goers who were taken to the hospital, both males, are in stable condition. It's unknown whether they've been released or not. And shooting Trump. I mean, shooting Trump's ear. Like Van Gogh now. There was, I think, one brief image circulating of him arriving in Milwaukee where he has the bandage the loose bandage on the ear. This to me is a major story. When we have like a massive news event, there are always calls for after action reports. We had the whole 9/11 commission, right? A lot of this stuff is, kind of recency bias sometimes, or you remember things. Oh, we could have done that. But here, with the assassination attempt on Saturday, the security failures played out like in real time. We know there was this real security failure here. Something happened that allowed this man to climb onto that roof. And I just continue to reiterate that the scandal at the Secret Service is going to be addressed. Has to be addressed.
Yeah, he should have called for her. He should have called for her resignation.
He didn't.
In that
of course,
speech.
Of course
right.
not.
He should have said, "I have asked
Instead, he
for
said,
her
"I want this
resignation."
independent investigation." When who knows when we'll get the results?
It occurs to me now that I don't think we've discussed the Secret Service failure yet, in terms of John's longstanding and accurate framing of the state of America's general competency problem, right? Where everyone has sort of lost the ability to properly do their jobs.
Right. Well, I saw Alejandro Mayorkas just before we started taping on CNN with Kate Baldwin, and she said, "What do you what happened here? Was this a massive failure of the Secret Service?" And Alejandro Mayorkas said, "These things cannot happen." It's like, really? Oh, good. Well, it happened.
Just did.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
First time in 40 years.
That's what you're saying. I understand he didn't have an answer to give. Although, if you don't have an answer to give, don't go on TV and give an answer like that, which is, yes, there was a terrible security failure. We're going to get to the bottom of it. You have no choice but to say that if you are going to go on television and talk about it. Mayorkas is a singularly infelicitous public figure when it comes to talking about the difficulties and problems and incompetencies of his department. And it's a hard job to try to defend his behavior and the department's behavior, not only here in this regard, but also in regard to the border and things like that. Nonetheless, I didn't make him take the job. I didn't make him stay in the job. I didn't tell him not to resign yesterday, which would have been a proper thing to do when someone under your protection, according to the rules of our country, is nearly a millimeter away from having his head blown off on national television. Saying I would understand the American people no longer can have confidence in my leadership and I have to resign would be meet and proper, would be something that would happen in other democracies or parliamentary systems. Did not happen here. And so you get this unbelievably ineffectual statement that is only going to make things worse, not better. I want to go back to this thing I said about Biden last night. So Biden spoke Saturday night and he spoke Sunday afternoon. He said on Saturday night, I spoke to Donald. It was a good conversation. We mourn the death of the rally goer, and we should not be speculating as to motive. We don't know what the motive of the shooter is yet. And then yesterday afternoon, he gave another talk in which I have already forgotten what he said. I was too hypnotized by the fact that over his left shoulder, he was in a room. There were all these presidential papers, books, sort of room raider, like you could see the books behind, which of course always obsesses me and the joke is that somebody always has The Power Broker by Robert Caro over his right shoulder to show that he's a serious political analyst. So all these presidential papers books, and right over his right shoulder were the papers of Nixon, which I didn't think was a particularly, good piece of staging. Maybe somebody should have rearranged the books a little bit so that you didn't see Nixon's name right there over his right shoulder. But he spoke twice, so fine, he spoke. It's the third speech that has me a little not rattled, but astonished at the political infelicity of this administration and this campaign. Because if he didn't have something to advance the conversation with, he shouldn't be standing there looking like Walter the ventriloquist puppet, which is what he is increasingly looks like. And when he walked out yesterday,
the walk was not good. Yeah, the walk was not good.
I mean, it just simply goes to the election becoming a visual of a question of the visuals here. And the visuals are Trump gets shot in the head and he stands up and he says, fight. And Biden can't walk out of the room without looking like he's about to keel over. And I'm not going with the sort of strength, weakness. I'm not a Heideggerian. I'm not going to stand here and praise Trump for his, vigor. I read Jonah Goldberg's Liberal Fascism and know that, vigor was a very big thing where people, Mussolini was vigor. There's the whole cult of vigorousness is kind of very, very creepy. So I'm not even going to use the word vigor in relation to Trump. It was something else. It's like life force. Something like that. Like he was just like, I am indomitable or something. And again, at a moment of deep spontaneity, he rose to the occasion as few of us could. And Biden is not rising to the occasion of being president during the assassination attempt of his rival. It's just that simple. And I don't know how else you're going to judge the next 4 months. We're going to be talking about issues. Seriously, I want to talk in a minute about unity and this stuff about unity because I don't really understand what it means, and we should talk about the media. But before I do, I want to talk to you about a new advertiser on the podcast, Quince. I'm happy to report that this is something I can talk about personally because Quince is a clothing service, an online clothing manufacturer and distributor. And I got a shirt through Quince to test it out, a beautiful brown linen shirt that is spectacularly nice and that I've now worn 3 times. It's comfortable, it's breathable, it's very attractive. And, when you open your closet and think, why did I buy that? That's not the case with Quince. I see fewer misses and more hits that I'll be wearing season after season. It has 100% European linen shirts from $38. That's like the one I got. A performance polos, versatile activewear, and all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes, along with premium fabrics and finishes. So fill your closet with timeless pieces you'll be wearing for summers to come with Quince. Go to quince.com/commentary for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/commentary to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/commentary. So, all right, I want to talk about unity, but I think we have to talk about the media first. The most astonishing story today is that Morning Joe has been canceled this week. MSNBC's signature political show runs from 6 to 10 in the morning. And according to Dylan Byers in the CNN Reliable Sources newsletter this morning, one source close to CNN told him that they did this not because they're covering everything as breaking news, which was one explanation that Brian Stelter, late of CNN, put out on Twitter, but because they cannot be confident that the revolving panel of loudmouths and liberals that now dominate the show that Noel Rothman and I used to be on until they decided that they no longer needed any kind of alleviating voice. They can't trust that somebody's not going to say something that's going to be really bad for them. And I want to remind people that, Morning Joe is MSNBC, that's owned by Comcast. Comcast is a publicly traded corporation. This is an incendiary moment. But the fact that they can't trust that their own people, granted, it's a lot of time on the air. It's like 20 hours in the course of a week, but that they can't trust that their own people won't be able to say Trump deserved it, or that, I don't know, I hear stories, maybe somebody's blah, blah, whatever, like that there's no upside, that the risk is not worth the reward. And so their signature political show goes dark during a presidential nominating convention. Am I taking crazy pills? No, they're taking sane pills.
Well, they're also, I think, trying to. There's a lot of memory holing going on right now in the media in terms of the both the tone and the consistently high temperature, which is everyone's favorite word now, of remarks of mainstream media reporters. So you see all the backpedaling. It's, well, we didn't really call Trump a fascist. What we were saying is that he would do radical things like fire Democrats and install his own people if he gets a second term. And that's a real threat to democracy. And so you see a lot of they're trying to do a lot of explaining, but Morning Joe was the show where everyone's they flirted with Blue Anon conspiracy theorizing all the time because they're just asking questions. And it's the same network that has Joy Reid, who just a day or so before Trump was shot at, was comparing him to Hitler. And, this has been the tone for years. So now suddenly we've got a week or two where they're going to go quiet, this show in particular. But you see this all across the mainstream media, efforts by reporters, efforts by journalists who've been covering Trump and covering the Biden administration, are extremely grateful not to have to cover Biden's aging for a little while, and instead can talk about how what they really are concerned about is the state and health of our democracy and our political culture.
I mean,
also just not Morning Joe. Apparently, The Daily Show is not going to cover the RNC in the way it intended. And tonight's Daily Show, Monday night, is usually hosted by Jon Stewart, and he will not appear. So this decision to curtail coverage, to bench major media figures, is an admission, I think, that the rhetoric was getting out of control.
I think it's here we go. I think it's worse than that. It's not just an admission.
I just say I've missed Abe.
Oh, we missed you, Abe.
I missed Abe.
I missed you guys. It's not just an admission that the rhetoric was getting out of control. I think it's an admission that they don't know how to talk about politics other than in apocalyptic terms. They don't have the vocabulary anymore. That's been atrophied because it's been years of threats to democracy itself, threats to the system, fascism, and whatever else. Like it would take a major overhaul to be confident that they can do a week's worth of policy talk, pure, boring policy talk.
Well, even the policy talk is apocalyptic.
Right.
We're going to talk about climate. Oh, well, the world's going to melt and we're all going to die. And I think we're in year 8 when AOC predicted 8 years ago that the world would end in 10 years.
Or Project 2025.
Project 2025, fascism.
Right.
The life issue, right? Abortions will be banned without exceptions across the country. So you're absolutely right. There is no way in which this part of the center left can talk about politics without immediately going to apocalyptic metaphors and inaccurate historical analogies.
Okay, so talk about handing Donald Trump the fastball that he can high and hard throw down, the center of the plate, and and have the Democrats with that. So Donald Trump, of course, is himself an apocalyptic rhetorician, right? They're the worst ever. There's going to be a bloodbath if I lose. We're losing our country. The borders are being destroyed. All of that, right? So that's his political personality from 2015 onward, is saying, I am here to save the country from the doom that it is now inexorably headed toward, or in the Flight 93 context, that the country is already doomed. So maybe if we crash the plane, maybe we can recover something from the wreckage. Now, all he has to do is dial it back. And he's a new Trump. And that's what he said yesterday to Selena Zito and to Michael Goodwin, my colleague at the New York Post, and others. He said, I'm retooling my speech. I'm retooling my speech to talk about unity. And this will have two interesting consequences, one of which is it if that is in fact what happens, and he gives a tough speech, but he doesn't use his own apocalyptic rhetoric, that he will flummox his rivals, who will say doesn't mean it, or they'll say he has no right to say this because he's the one who started all this. And the people who are paying less attention and who haven't actually heard him speak in the last couple of years or aren't watching cable TV, which has, 3 million viewers out of 330 million people, and might well listen to this speech now double time because of what happened on Saturday, just to see what condition he's in and all of that. They're going to say, he sounds reasonable.
Well, and
this is a good speech or whatever. I mean, I'm just saying he doesn't sound like the old Trump that I didn't like in 2020.
Yes. Okay. But if you look, so I have a couple friends who've been sending me what they've been getting from the Trump campaign in the last 48 hours. There's a whole lot of love. It's like a love fest. He's like, I love you for supporting me. I mean, the way he's speaking is very much. Now, this is not surprising. He could have died. This is a transformative moment for any human being, setting aside whether they're a politician. But there's a huge thing he can use strategically at this convention, which is to be not to say kinder and gentler, but to be a different sort of unifying Trump who does talk more in that way, because he's had this road to Damascus transformation. So anyone attacking him saying you're the problem starts to look petty, starts to look like they didn't recognize that he could have lost his life in his effort to run for president. So I think, but that assumes that Trump has the discipline to continue with that sort of tone beyond the convention for the next several months. That's a real challenge for him.
Unity is a very weird message to be preaching, both by Biden and by Trump, in the course of an extraordinarily partisan moment that is supposed to be a partisan moment. We have an election coming up in 3.5 months in which voters all over the country are going to be asked not only to decide which political tendency they are going to choose to run the country for the next 4 years, that with very different ideas about what role government should play, what role the United States should play in the world, what role the United States should play in terms of the moral framing of issues like family and gender and abortion and other things. It is supposed to be a partisan moment in the sense that we're not unified. And we shouldn't be unified. We're a country in which people get to have a lot of different opinions in a lot of different ways. And we have not only the presidential election, but we have 435 congressional elections and 33 Senate elections and thousands of elections down ballot. The word unity in these contexts is often used as a form of saying, shut up, he explained. We need to be unified. It's a time for unity. So don't you say anything mean about me, and then I can say that you're not being properly unified. And Trump saying that he's going to give a speech about unity is a perfect boxing out of, or a perfect bringing it to his rivals and hitting them at their most pompous and disingenuous point on their, in their solar plexus. Because this notion that Trump, is uniquely divisive, that is true, or that may well have been true in 2015, 2016. And I think we all felt that this was a new kind of divisive politics. But as Abe indicates, if it were Trump alone back then, it's not Trump alone now. This is a bipartisan problem of demonization of the other, of talking about everybody that you disagree with as though that person is a unique threat to democracy. And so if Biden's going to play the unity card, Trump plays the unity card, the media start talking all about unity and how we're so polarized. This is going to be worse. I mean, I love this whole thing. Like Peter Baker has a piece in the New York Times today. This is only going to get worse, says Peter Baker. Worse than a millimeter away from the former president of the United States and current candidate for the president of the United States having his head blown off on live television. How much worse can it get? At least in an individual case, this is as bad as it gets. Now, if the country explodes into riots and cities are burned down and all of that, that's worse, right? Because it's arguably worse not only that Trump was shot, but that Mr. Comparatore was murdered, a genuine hero, a firefighter who leapt on his wife and daughter's bodies to prevent that bullet from hitting them, and the two others. Like, this is as bad as it gets. Getting this kind of arch, oh, the polarization is only going to get
They
worse.
don't know what to say, John. I mean, It's so pathetic what the media is saying. It's just ridiculous. And it's not even worth reading, to be honest with you. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is terrible. Well, look, we can go to 1968 is what Baker writing about, suggesting that, after the assassination of Martin Luther King, America did go up in flames, right? And then there was the Chicago Convention. Of course, America survived 1968, and America will survive this. And the talk about unity, I think, will last no more than a month. I mean, it will be
a week.
Maybe this week. Maybe they'll keep it off. They'll keep Morning Joe off the air for the RNC or whatever, and then it'll be just back to normal business next week or in a couple of weeks after that. So the platitudes, the moralizing, it's all silliness. It really is. I think at the end of the day, Trump is different. This is something we've been talking about on the podcast prior to the assassination attempt. He has been more modulated. He has listened to his advisors, all the people telling him, don't interrupt Biden, play it straight with during the debate. He did that. The message is, as soon as he was checked out by the doctors, coming out of Trump from that first social media post was, God is great. He saved me. It was a miracle. I want to bring the country together. I love you all. I think I'm pretty sure Melania Trump's letter to the American people came out after we recorded the podcast on Sunday. So we should take a moment on that. I thought that was just a brilliant, remarkable document where she talked about how, Trump is turned into what she called the inhuman political machine, this figure that has dominated the world for almost a decade. And she said that leaves out kind of the Trump that she knows. And it's a very graceful line. She says, we've been through both the best of times and the worst of times. And anyone who's familiar with their history, that's true. But she talked about the other qualities, specifically, she mentions in the letter Trump's love of music, which we hear reports of. He likes to DJ when he's eating dinner at Mar-a-Lago. I recall a long time ago seeing a video of him taken. This is before he entered politics, even, like listening to Taylor Swift in the car, who he thinks is very beautiful, as we know. So there's this other Trump that you would hear stories about, but is not the public figure, for reasons of his own choosing, and of course the way in which the media portrays him. And that might be able to come out a little bit, I think, during the RNC. And if that happens, you do have the chance to kind of reframe the election. Trump is very strong in these categories of effective leadership. Does he have the capacities to be the president? Is he a strong leader? When you ask about these attributes, he does very well. The one attribute he has not done so well about during this current election is, does he care about people like me? So this event offers a chance for him to show a different side of his personality, and one that I think could be very, very effective in really kind of sealing the deal for a Trump victory in November.
I'm struck by the tone. You also talk about the tone, and again, talking to Selena and to Michael yesterday, Trump saying, this is a moment you don't get in life. I should be dead. If I hadn't turned my head to look at the screen, the bullet would have killed me. And if I can get a little grand, it reminds me this kind of potentially transformative moment. He's 78 years old. He's not really going to be a transformed person, but there was this moment in War and Peace when Pierre Bejuhoff, one of the protagonists of the novel, challenges a very vicious, very tough soldier who has been making moves on his wife to a duel, and Pierre, much to his own amazement, actually injures the other guy and doesn't get shot himself, and that the response of Dolokhov, the character that he shoots, is to fall to the ground and change and say, I've lived my life wrong, and I have been given a second lease on life to understand how it is that I should live. And if there is any moment in any life that could have that, there are these two different versions of that, right? Which is the Winston Churchill line that there is nothing more exhilarating than being shot at without result. But, there was a result. I mean, we don't know what he looks like. We don't know what he's going to look like when he shows up at the convention. His ear was bisected by a bullet. I mean, it wasn't just grazed. You could see that it was torn. He said he heard his own skin tear. Again, we're in unprecedented territory here as a kind of public test. So he not only passed the initial instant test in an extraordinary way. The rest of the week is going to be another form of this test. Is the tone of the convention going to be different? Are Peter Navarro and Tucker Carlson going to end up actually speaking at the convention, or will they hew to this new
Nikki
question?
Nikki Haley is speaking tomorrow. That was a very late add.
Yeah,
the speaker's
and
list.
I don't know, and then there's of course Trump's own speech. So all kinds of things could happen. But the unity thing that he is embracing, as I say, I think tactically is very smart, because it puts his rivals on the back foot. But I don't want unity. And I'm sorry, I don't want unity in the United States. I don't want to be unified and say, oh, I'm sorry, I want to keep my rhetoric much calmer about what's going on college campuses as Harvard cancels the suspension of the students that it had suspended for their anti-Semitic activities, and as Columbia does some of the same things, and as SJP and other groups are announcing that they're about to start, major actions as the fall commences. I don't want unity. I want those people arrested. I want them thrown out of school. I want them unemployed for the rest of their lives, and I want the ones who are here on student visas to be deported from this country. I have no interest in unity if what unity means is don't be angry at the people who are destroying the country or destroying your people or whatever. That's not real unity. That's surrender to evil. And I'm not going there. But if unity means that we're now supposed to stop saying things like, you're a fascist when you're not a fascist. And Trump is many things. He's a populism is bad enough. Trump is not a fascist. Bob Kagan, it is shocking that he wrote this book calling him a fascist. It is shocking that Anne Applebaum calls him a fascist. It is shocking that Timothy Snyder and that guy Jason Stanley call him a fascist. It is shocking that the New Republic should put him on the cover with a Hitler mustache. These are things that are shocking, and I don't actually expect any of those people to decide that unity is going to be the message. I mean, my friend David Frum said basically Trump unleashed the whirlwind against himself in a piece in The Atlantic yesterday. I think that's going to be the general tone. They're not going to show unity, and maybe they shouldn't. That's not how they think, and that's not how they believe. It would be better.
I mean, if you really
stopped, but it's not going to.
If you are among those who really believe that Trump is a fascist and that his second Trump presidency will bring fascism properly to America, and that he is like Hitler, and you believe all the rest, why on earth would you wish him well? Why would you be in favor of unity? If I believed that the equivalent of Hitler was on the verge of taking over the United States, I would not be wishing him well. I would not at this moment be calling for unity. So who believes it? Who doesn't? That is an interesting question, and I think there are both camps on somewhere on the liberal left and on the left. I think some do believe it, and some just say it. So is the unity means if you don't believe it, don't say it. If you believe it, I can't change your mind.
Look, we've been spending 70 years, or at least we did a show you guys haven't heard yet on science fiction, our favorites in science fiction. And of course, I think the most famous science fiction television program ever made, though we did not really talk about this, or episode of science fiction, was an episode of Star Trek called City on the Edge of Forever, written by Harlan Ellison, which actually posits this question of whether or not the crew goes back to the 1930s and it could materially affect the outcome of World War II. And it has to, and they decide they have to allow the assassin, they have to allow someone, they know they can interfere with the killing of someone that they have to allow happen, because all of history will not take place leading to their own existences should they interfere. I bring this up only to say that we have been dealing with this question of like what to do if you could kill baby Hitler, right? The Boys from Brazil, Ira Levin's novel, the movie. This is like the trolley problem. It's this whole thing. Like, is that saving 6 million people, taking one life to save 6 million people, or would you do it? Would it happen, or something like that? That is a thing that has sort of consumed our popular culture and philosophy classes and all of this since 1945. And the simple fact of the matter is, I think we all probably think that if we could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, even if it would mean that we would somehow be erased from history, you probably would. So if that's the case, Abe, as you're saying, the logical extension of their position is that it's too bad that Crooks didn't succeed in his shot. Not that he did. Not that he didn't.
Would have to be right if that's how you.
I mean, no one's going to
know.
say it because it's
Right.
gruesome. It immediately sort of removes you from civil discourse.
If
But
people
maybe it
followed
won't.
Abe's dictum of only saying what you believe, that we 75% of the media would go dark.
Spontaneously mute, actually. Yeah.
But you do offer a great test to see who's a hack and who isn't.
Yeah.
And also, who's watched City on the Edge of Forever? Abe, as you have returned to our shores and are here to offer us your wisdom, perhaps you can give us your commentary recommends for the day.
So I just watched last night, in fact, a documentary that I think all of you will like and a great many of our listeners will like, and it's called Remembering Gene Wilder from 2023. And it is goes through his career, Gene Wilder's career and his childhood a bit. There's a lot of him in it. He sort of narrates it. I'm not sure how, perhaps because
It's from his book.
from
It's
a book recording. That's what I
a
figured.
recording of his memoir. Yeah.
And it really paints a terrifically engaging portrait of what a quirky, interesting, creative guy he was, and how he hooked up with Mel Brooks through Anne Bancroft, and his particular blend of innocence and outrageousness, and his peculiar chemistry with Richard Pryor in the later movies, his own interest in writing movies and directing movies, his tragic brief marriage with Gilda Radner, who died of cancer soon after they were married, his finding love again, and then of course his getting ill and dying from Alzheimer's later. It's really it's as delightful as you want a documentary about Gene Wilder to be. It's sort of spotty in that you learn that when he was a child, his mother had a bad heart, and a doctor had told him, "Don't argue with your mother; you could kill her." And he says that sort of set his attitude toward the world about sort of not being oppositional and trying to make people laugh and things like that. But you don't really get a sense outside of that of who he was beyond his movie career. I don't know. You don't know where he lived. You don't know what his love life was about, aside from these 2 late in life marriages. It's not about that. It's about his approach to making movies, acting, performing. It's a little bit about how he likes to he liked to paint watercolors. All the evidence of which seems he was very good at it. But I highly recommend it, especially because there's a lot of Mel Brooks in it. So you in particular, John, and it's all very funny. The Mel Brooks stuff.
It is. I'm fascinated by Gene Wilder. I watched the documentary myself, and I'm fascinated by him because his career took a very, very, very unexpected turn in the mid '70s. He had emerged as this, astonishing, lunatic supporting actor in The Producers. He had been in Bonnie and Clyde the year before, but gave this indelible performance, this scene of an outbreak of absolute deranged hysteria, the likes of which no one had ever seen before. Then he made Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where he was also had this lunatic gleam in his eye the entire way, and you didn't know if he was crazy or heartfelt or whatever, and you could never make sense out of who he was at any given moment. Young Frankenstein, the same thing. And then in 1976, he makes a huge hit movie makes 2 hit movies, one called Silver Streak and one called Stir Crazy, both with Richard Pryor. And his entire mien changed. He became sort of a cuddly, lovable teddy bear of a character that you were just supposed to embrace and take to your heart. And then he played a rabbi in The Frontier with Harrison Ford as the cowboy who rides him to San Francisco and it was a very interesting thing because it would be like you took, you took a primal id person and you domesticated him. It's like you domesticated him and made him lovable. And he really wasn't that good after. He never did anything that made you go, "Oh my God, that's Gene Wilder. He's fantastic," because he sacrificed his originality for stardom, which a lot of people do or happy to do. Becoming cuddly and lovable, and that is sort of, you can get that from the documentary. It's not a point that's made in the documentary, and it also makes it seem like this is actually something that he made him happy. So if it made him happy, it's a wonderful thing. It's also wonderful to know that his name was Jerry Silverman and not Gene Wilder, which is always good to be reminded of people in their past. So that's Remembering Gene Wilder. I think it's on Max. But if you just Google it, it's free for all if you subscribe to any of the major services. So we'll be back tomorrow to talk about the first night of the Republican convention and what signals that may offer, and maybe we'll have some more to say about the shooter, whose extraordinary lack of any presence on social media whatsoever is right now the freakiest thing about him. The minute that his name came up in the New York Post, and hours before anybody else was using it, I immediately went to the Google machine, and I went to TikTok, I went everywhere, and there is nothing, which is fascinating. I don't think there's nothing because I don't think they could have been expunged that fast either. So they're apparently having to go through a whole process to just jailbreak his phone and get to it, which, Apple, while people talk about our privacy problems and all that, this apparently is a huge deal if you have an iPhone.
Well, we went through it with the San Bernardino shooters, if you recall.
Yeah, that's right. And Apple refused at the time to help with the San Bernardino shooter, because it was trying to make the point that even in those circumstances, it had created the conditions under which even Apple could not open an Apple phone. I'm sure the Israelis know a way to.
They got a
open
bridge
Apple
to
phone.
sell you too, if you believe that.
Okay.
But
Well,
still.
that was 2016, so whatever. Anyway, but anyway, so maybe we'll have more to talk about there. But until then, for Matt, Christine, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.